Welcome to SportsLit. I'm Neil Acharya.
And I am Nate Sager.
It's a first. Today on SportsLit, our focus is on a children's book. And if you're formulating an idea, don't, because it's probably not what you think. Canadians have been blessed with beloved and intelligent works aimed at kids, like Brian McFarlane's Peter Puck series, which was released starting in 1975, and of course, Roch Carrier's opus from 1979, The Hockey Sweater, which painted two solitudes in such a compelling and thoughtful manner. For lack of a better way to put it, there was a weight to it. It could be appreciated on many different levels across different age groups. And that's what brings me to the Ice Chip series and our guest today, author Roy MacGregor. Roy MacGregor was once described by the Washington Post as the closest thing to a poet laureate of Canadian hockey. For his writing, he has received multiple accolades, including the Elmer Ferguson Memorial Award as an inductee into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2012, and as well as the Order of Canada 7 years earlier in 2005. So yeah, a children's book. Ice Chips is a fictional youth hockey team, the Riverton Ice Chips, that can travel back in time through the work of a Zamboni named Scratch, or as the MacGregors accurately call it, an ice resurfacing machine. The team is a diverse cast of characters, which includes a young Sikh kid named Ekimjeet Singh, nicknamed Edge, and Swift, a female goalie with a prosthetic limb. Alex Stepanov and Crunch both come from immigrant families that speak a language other than English to each other. Their adventures have allowed them to meet a young Gordie Howe and Sidney Crosby, as well as witness the Calgary Winter Olympics 32 years ago. The book provides intrigue on two fronts, through what I would call an active prose lesson in Canadian history, and which uses political license, and also a contemporary spin, which is a comment on the current state of minor hockey in Canada, in some way at least. The main character, Lucas Finnegan, is portrayed as what we might assume to be a lower middle class kid, and he uses hand-me-down equipment. And the villains are those that push the business of minor hockey, hockey for profit, my kid to the pros or bust type. And that's portrayed in the form of the Blitz family, Coach Blitz and his children, Jared and Beatrice. The most recent installment of Ice Chips, The Stolen Cup, was just released in February. And, of course, I should mention Roy has written this along with his daughter, Kerry, and there are great illustrations by Kim Smith. And so today he's going to join us. But Nate, of course, you've long been a fan of Roy, and I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, this was obviously Roy MacGregor's now retired from the Globe and Mail, had his column there for many years in the Ottawa Citizen, written award-winning wilderness writer, has collaborated with Ken Dryden. We're going to get into his hockey novel, The Last Season, which is something I've revisited so many times. It's probably one of the five novels I've spent the most time with as an adult. Like, it's on my Kindle app. I'll start scrolling through it. In terms of this was obviously, as guys who don't have children, this was probably our first...
None that I know about.
None acknowledged. This was our first exposure to the Ice Chip series, and so we got to see what works and what Roy MacGregor and Kerry MacGregor are trying to convey through, writing to a young audience of kids who were like 9, 10 years old. They're sort of trying to get, hockey's all about anticipation, the old go where the puck is going, not where it's been. And I think they're trying to impart to children who are at that impressionable age where you're forming your values, here's some lessons about how to relate to the world and be open and accepting and take people on their merits and not on labels. The Stolen Cup, of course, actually, when they meet a pivotal character out of history is Isabel Stanley, who was a big hockey enthusiast, the daughter of Lord Stanley, the creator of the Stanley Cup, but she had a big role in it. So the Stolen Cup kind of touches on the importance of girls and women in building the popularity of hockey in Canada in the early years, like in the late 19th century. And people, girls just didn't start playing hockey in the 1990s or 1987 when my mom signed my sister up for minor hockey. That seems pretty topical in a 2020 context when you have, the Dream Gap tour and the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association, members taking on hardship in an effort to convince big sponsors and NHL owners that there's an audience for women's hockey outside of the World Championships and the Olympics. Now getting to Roy MacGregor, of course, we sort of did some cliff notesing of his Wikipedia entry. We're going to ask about the last season, maybe a little indulgent to ask about a book that was published in 1983, but I think it still holds up. And there aren't a lot of hockey novels out there written for adults. Like I posted on a Facebook group, hey, can people name some hockey novels? Like this is a Facebook group literally called Hockey Books. And no one named anything. And I think the only thing I could think of that was contemporary is by the Swedish writer Fredrik Backman, Beartown, and the sequel Us Against You is James, Canada is huge and hockey is huge in Canada, but the two don't intertwine. Roy actually did intertwine them. So we're very grateful he could join us today, a writer who writes about hockey from the perspective of it being a culture, as he's put it, more of a cultural phenomenon than an athletic phenomenon, something that's only now really starting to make it into the mainstream coverage in Canada. So, glad he can make some time for our program.
Bang on, Nate. After the break, Roy MacGregor. So my first question, Roy, is why did you come up with the idea and how for the series Ice Chips with your daughter?
I guess it's traceable to the previous series that I did called The Screech Owls, and that began in 1995, and there's 29 volumes in that, plus a scrapbook, so 30 books. And it was about a peewee team that kind of solved crimes and played hockey all around the world. A bit far-fetched, but kids seem to love it. Out in several languages, about 2 million copies sold. And my daughter Kerry had helped me with the final book in the series set in Detroit. So we started thinking after that, what about a series aimed at a slightly younger group? She came up with the idea of a group of kids, maybe 8, 9 years old, and call them the Ice Chips, and they have a magic Zamboni, because kids just love the Zamboni, as you know. And this Zamboni is so magical that every time it floods the ice, it takes them back in time when they step across the center line, which allows them, in our imagination anyway, to go back and visit some of the greats in the game, whether it's Gordie Howe or Haley Wickenheiser or Sidney Crosby, but visit them when Gordie Howe was 8 years old, when Haley was 8 years old, when Sidney was 8 years old, and hopefully learn a lesson as they go back.
Now, Kerry, your daughter, lives in France, I believe, so how does the writing process work between the two of you?
Well, maybe it's a good thing that she lives so far away, because we'd be bumping heads half the time. It's, she can be stubborn, I can be stubborn, but we work it out and we do it all through email, and then at least once a year we get together. Usually she comes over with her family for a month in the summer.
What was harder? And you just talked about, going back, and there's a young Sidney Crosby, a young Gordie Howe in the book that the latest one released last month. You go back and go back in time to the 1892 Winter Carnival, and Isabel Stanley is there. What was harder, the process of nailing down the intricate historical details in a fast-moving narrative like this, or capturing the current experience of minor hockey? Because it's a very contemporary book in that regard.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed the historical part, because it was, every book should teach something. You should learn something when you read a book. So I enjoyed going back to the origins of the Stanley Cup. And Lord Stanley, who was a Governor General here in Canada, had a daughter, Isabel, who some people say was the first girl to play the game of hockey back in 1892. So I enjoyed that stuff. But as you say, it's also set in modern times, and we're trying to deal with some of the modern problems and the modern nice things about minor league hockey as well. It might be about bullying. It might be about the pleasures of teamwork, friends for life. Each one is a lesson. The Gordie Howe, for example, came from a very impoverished background, and so it was a nice way to put a lesson in about you don't have to have the best equipment. You don't have to go to the very expensive summer skating schools and that you can be a kid out in a frozen pond and you can play the game of hockey and become quite good at it.
Roy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading one of your previous works. It might have been a foreword to a book, and you said something like you switched over to a composite stick and you still score as many goals as you did with a wooden one. Was that from you? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, I've said that before. Yeah.
But,
I mean, to go from buying $2 Hespeler Micmacs and Green Flashes back when I began that kind of minor hockey at ages 6 to 10 or so, and then now I was just up at a store near us, and there's a stick there that's with $399 Canadian dollars, and it's I don't know who makes it, but it's got a little hole in the middle of it so that you can, I guess, so you can whip the blade faster and there'd be less resistance, but it makes no sense. What kid needs a $400 stick?
Well, in this book, Lucas Finnegan, the first book, it's established that he has hand-me-down equipment, right? So that's tying into this contemporary narrative that you guys wrote about, you and your daughter wrote about. There's obviously a group of kids from different backgrounds. And there's also the villains are the Blitz family, seem to be, really focused on the business of minor hockey. So that obviously was a conscious choice by the both of you to include that in this book.
Well, I guess it's me because I coached both a daughter and a son all through minor hockey, and you see the good and the bad. I'm a great believer in the game, but there's a lot of bad things about the game that could be repaired. One of them obviously is cost, and the other one is that this is a very difficult one for hockey, that while Canada has become so multicultural as is the United States, you don't see that reflected as well as it should be in hockey.
Is that reflected in the title of this Stolen Cup? Because I mean, Isabel Stanley, as you mentioned, is a character, and
yeah.
and how much does this sort of give a history lesson that hey, girls and women were part of this sport from the beginning, but then got pushed out to the margins for generations, probably until well into the 1980s, I guess.
Yeah, it's true, and well, of course, that would be Kerry, my daughter. She has a vested interest in that being known, but. Haley Wickenheiser, for example, helped us with the book. She gave us ideas to work with and that. And Haley's a big promoter of women's hockey and very important in women's hockey, so it was important to us to be able to link with her. And also, you have to remember that it's not just boys reading these books; it's boys and girls. And when I did the Screechos, I made the best player a girl. And I heard from so many girls who were so appreciative of that. And yet I had done it not really thinking. I just thought, well, this is something different to do. I didn't realize the import that it would have for them.
So would you mind reading from page 78, I believe you know where you're going with this, 78 to 80.
Yeah, I've got it marked out.
Thank you.
As quickly as they could, the ice chips slid off the ice and pushed their way through the crowd until they found somewhere to stand. What is this? The first hockey game ever played? Lucas asked jokingly. There were referees on the ice, but once the game had started, it didn't seem to be doing a very good job of stopping the players from fighting. No Francophone players can fight like that, I tell you. Look at those Irishmen go, a man standing in front of them shouted. He was cheering on the players, who were yelling at each other in English, as 2 penalties were finally given. He'd obviously been enjoying the fighting. But then again, he said, winking at Lucas, there ain't many French-Canadian players of class, So, just as an aside, this is to show the rift that was in the country of Canada in the 1890s. Hopefully kids would understand that. We're now very much a bilingual country and a bicultural country, and so my daughter and I are great believers in that, so we put this in purposely. The game was between the Montreal Victorias, the players with the V's on their sweaters, and the Montreal Hockey Club, whose sweaters were decorated with either flying wheels or bunnies. Neither Edge nor Swift could decide which was which. It was supposed to be a hockey game, but to the Ice Chips, it felt like what they imagined a night at the opera would be. There were largely fancy sheets draped from the rafters, and the flags hung from above. Boughs of pine trees had been stretched over the ice like garlands. At rink level, people were standing to watch the game, even though there were no boards. And on a level above that, in what looked like balcony seats, the spectators were dressed like they were attending a royal dinner. Edge, over there, Swift said, nudging him with her elbow. She was nodding her head toward a couple who could in fact be royalty. They had special seats with the best view of the game. Even their children, several boys and one girl, were attracting attention. At least they seem to be being admired by the people around them on the upper level. The guy standing in front of the ice chips, the one who didn't like French players, kept calling them foreigners. The Queen's representative is not Canadian, the man explained in a rude tone when he caught Swift giving him her best side eye. Not everyone can play this game. The Irish Canadians are wonders, the French are too slow, and the British, well, this game is too rough for them. They shouldn't even be here. The man motioned toward the royal family as he said this last sentence, and then a second later, he was cheering on the Victorias once again. That's not true. Everyone can play hockey, Edge thought to himself angrily. Anyone from any country and any background. And French players are some of the greatest. Even the British sometimes have great. The British? That's what Swiss Nudge was telling him. Up on the second level, the royal couple's daughter was transfixed, as though she'd never seen a game of hockey in her life. Edge could tell that she was falling in love, just as he had, while the game unfolded before her eyes. She was grinning. She was cheering. But this was the girl who'd appeared on the ice back in Riverton.
That's great. So why I wanted you to read that is because of, well, two reasons. First of all, to explain how detailed the history is in these books, and also because it as you took an aside to explain the context. But what I like is I think it appeals to a kid's highest, the highest common denominator, for them to read that and actually wonder, okay, where is this coming from? And the way it's written, you understand automatically. So that's what I liked about it, and that's why I wanted you to read it. But I wanted to know how you went about getting the resources and the research into such detail going back to this time.
From libraries, history books, there's a lot written about the Governor General and his family back in the 1890s. That setting is exactly as it was at the arena that they would go to watch the hockey games in. So that's fun. That's just research. I like doing it. But you have to tell a story. That story and that man talking there, that's all about bigotry. But I can't use a word like bigotry when I'm writing for 7, 8-year-old kids. I have to explain it without even using the word. But maybe, just maybe, they'll come to understand that you shouldn't talk that way, that you shouldn't think that way. And not only shouldn't you think that way, it's not that way. Edge, for example, has ancestry from East India. Swift is a girl playing hockey. And there are lots of different cultures involved in the ice chips. So that's what we're hoping to do, is kind of modernize children's image of the game.
The acknowledgments in the end explain how you got some of the information. For example, with Edge, or Ekamjeet is his real name, and he's got there's a lot of Punjabi language in there. So how did you go about sourcing out people to help you to get those details correctly into the book?
Well, in Canada, we have Hockey Night in Canada, which is a tradition that goes back decades. And they broadcast in French and in English, the two official languages in Canada. But a couple of years ago, they began broadcasting in Punjabi, Hockey Night in Punjabi. And so they had the announcers on there. And those announcers were quite approachable. Kerry did all the contract work here, and they helped us out hugely. They were just delighted that someone would be writing a hockey book and would talk about their contributions to the game.
And how much does that tie into something you've said, that you were drawn to writing about hockey because you view it in Canada as more of a cultural phenomenon than an athletic phenomenon?
Well, I don't think you can understand any country without understanding what game they most play, most care about. You can draw generalizations, of course, but the creativity of Brazilians in soccer, the way that Russians have taken to hockey, but also many other sports, the British and their football, which is quite different from, say, the Brazilians and their football, Americans and American football. You can tell an awful lot about America that way. So I've always felt that hockey is just not an entertainment in Canada. It's part of the cultural fiber. And we've had so many books written on it. Ken Dryden and I, in fact, have written quite a bit about this, how it's so ingrained and so much a part of us that it even forms part of our language. You hear in Parliament saying that you're skating on thin ice, or they'll say that you don't want to go into the corners with that guy. Well, that's hockey language that's been transferred right over to our political spectrum. It's there everywhere.
And
other countries do it to their sports as well, as you know.
Yeah, and sort of taking a bit of a 90-degree turn. At one point, I think in this novel, you have the ice chips having a cross-ice practice that in our episode we did with Sean Fitzgerald last year, he described some of the drama when that was introduced in minor hockey. How much does that tie into just the cultural that sort of controversy tie into the cultural hold hockey exercises on some people's minds and their reactions to new things?
Yeah, new things. Well, this is the country that produced Don Cherry, don't forget. Yeah, Sean is quite right. There was a real backlash when you had little kids of ages, let's say 6, 7, 8, and 9, who, in terms of body mass, might take up 5% of that ice surface, and yet their parents are insisting that their practice involve 100% of that ice surface. It's an absurdity. So many years ago, and I was one of the coaches too, we started doing cross-ice practices and maybe having 3 groups in each zone, one group in each zone. And even I was over and I studied minor hockey at one point in Sweden, and I came back there where they use miniature nets, so I was able to purchase miniature nets, and they were little tiny nets, almost as if you'd be playing with a mini stick, but I'd let my kids play on a smaller ice surface and try to get the puck into that net. So the goaltender was having fun because he had this little net to protect, and the kids were having a riot because it was a different thing to do. You can be so inventive when you're coaching hockey, and you should reach out and seek out new ideas and try them. But then you go back to what you just talked about. There is, generally speaking, going to be a backlash. You have to really ignore some of the parents. Most parents are quite good, but every hockey group I've ever been involved with, there's always some parents you kind of rather wish weren't in the arena, if I may say it that way. You just have to do it.
Roy, you have a couple of actor credits to your name, possibly more, 2 that I know about. I was wondering, have you thought about turning this series into a cartoon at all?
I wish that would happen. I haven't thought about it, but I'm hoping somebody would. When I did the Screech shows, a company in Toronto purchased the rights to the series and produced 2 seasons of the Screech shows. Now, what happened there was these kids are 10, 11, and 12, and so when at the end of the second season, especially the girls, they looked like grown-ups, and they kind of grew out of their roles. The beauty of cartoons, as Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse have shown us for decades, is you never have to grow older, you never have to grow bigger. So I would much prefer to see a cartoon done with this.
Have there been any talks yet? No?
No, nothing.
Okay.
No.
You mentioned the political arena a couple of questions ago. I want to ask you, just shifting away from this book in particular, can you travel back with us and for our listeners, explain to them how you ended up becoming a writer and specifically sports? The reason I bring up the political arena is I believe you were covering Parliament, were you not?
Yes, I was. I covered Parliament for 14 years, 1978 to 1992. And in 1992, that was when the Ottawa Senators had their franchise and started playing in the National Hockey League. I was working here in Ottawa, and I worked for the Ottawa Citizen. And parking downtown was getting expensive, and we were having arguments back and forth about who should be paying for this and where, because Parliament Hill had been providing free parking for the media, and suddenly the press were on their high horses saying we shouldn't accept free parking, we should pay for our own. And our argument was, well, if you're going to go that way, that's fine, but we want our newspaper to pay for it. We don't want to pay for it ourselves. So the editor of the newspaper invited me to lunch, and he opened it up. First of all, he ordered a beer for each of us, and then he said, I've solved your parking problem. I said, oh, you have? Thanks, thinking that he was about to offer me, free parking or they would pay for it. He said, from now on, you're parking at the Civic Center. And I looked at him, I said, what are you talking about? He said, I want you to start covering the Senators.
How was the shift for you then? What were the similarities between the political arena and the hockey arena? Or the differences?
They're almost exactly the same, except that the hockey players have numbers on their back. The same BS goes on, the same grandstanding goes on, the same kind of scorekeeping goes on, the same kind of never answering a question properly goes on. I mean, if you've ever been in a scrum in a hockey dressing room in the last 10 years, you know what I'm talking about.
I think both me and Nate can attest to that. Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, every time I'm like at the gym and see like a coach's post game availability, I'm like, that's just like politics. And why are we? And I'm always like, and why are we giving this guy this platform?
Right on.
Now, one thing I did want to touch on from before you went into sports at the Citizen was a book that's near and dear to my heart. It's you published in 1983, a novel called The Last Season. I understand it didn't start out with hockey at its core, but how did you end up getting to that point?
I wanted to write about the Polish experience in Canada, where I grew up or where I came from. There's an awful lot of Poles that settled there, and some married into my family and that. So I was very intrigued by this in Central Ontario. I started writing my main character, who I called Felix Baderinsky. I had him as an executive assistant to a senator here in Ottawa, and it was not working out. And then that old cliche, you should write what you know. And I started thinking about, well, what do I know? I've played hockey all my life. By sheer fluke, I grew up playing against Bobby Orr because we're exactly the same age, and our towns were about an hour apart from each other. So our town played his town all the time. We never won. But I was able to write about what it felt like to play against Bobby Orr. And also in 1981, I'd gone to Finland with a group of old-timers. Finnair was trying to introduce kind of beer league hockey trips to Finland. We got over there. It was a team out of Toronto. They called themselves the Toronto Maple Leaves, Leaves, which they thought was cute and smart, but it didn't translate properly. The people in Finland thought it was the ex-Leafs coming over to play, and they filled the stadiums. They had 3 periods and floods in between and sold tickets, and we were dreadful and got absolutely trounced. But I had that experience to draw from, too. I knew what it was like to play on the big ice surface and what it was like to play hockey in Finland.
Yeah, didn't you score a hat trick on that tour?
How did you know that?
You wrote about it in Home Game.
Oh, yeah, I did too. Yeah, well, the third goal came because it was right after the flood between the second and the third period. And you know how when you start to play hockey, right away sometimes there's sticky spots in the ice, and a defenseman came rushing off the ice, and he was going to fly through our whole team and score yet another goal, but it stuck in the ice, and I was going the other direction. I picked it up and went in, and I put it into the net, but I don't even know. I'll tell this other story. A little uncomfortable telling it, but it's true. We had noticed in the warm-up that as one of our guys in the team said, he's got no glove hand, So go high in the glove. And all 3 of my goals, I went high in the glove. And then at the end of the game, they'd won handily. We shook hands. And as I went through the line, I had my hand out, and it came to the goalie. I put my right hand out, and he put his left hand out. And he took my left hand, and I realized he did not actually have a hand.
So
he literally didn't have a glove hand.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite something too. You think now with so many athletes, how big the Paralympics are now. Like athletes like Aurélie Rivard are a great swimmer, and how the success she's had.
And not just that, Swift in the ice chips has a prosthetic leg, does she not, Roy?
Yes, that was my daughter's idea, Kerry. I thought that was neat, and she then went to a family. She knew of a family in town that has a boy who's playing with a prosthetic leg, and we went and visited them, and he showed us exactly how it works in hockey, and he was quite excited about it, and he's become quite a good little player, so we really modeled her on him in terms of the prosthetic leg.
And then one other question that's sort of come up to mind every time I reread The Last Season. There was a sports writer character named Matt Keating, and his diction really reminded me of your friend and colleague, the late great Earl McRae. Now, please tell me if I am just imagining things.
No, you're not. Earl the Pearl. I miss him terribly.
Yeah, as do I. I had the good fortune to work with him in the last few years of his life. How do you? Just one last question about that book. How do you sort of relate to it now? I guess more than 35 years later. I think you've described it as having a bit of a cultish shelf life. I have it on my Kindle app on my phone and look at it constantly.
It only has a cultish life. It never had another life. It's weird. I run into people. I run into a number of people who claim the book is about them. And, they had minor careers in Europe and that, and I have to dissuade them of that. But I don't know, people who liked it like it a lot, and not too many people bought it. But I'm very, very proud of it and very happy and very glad that I switched it over to hockey from politics.
Speaking of like marketability, I mean, when you want to put out a book now, I'm imagining it's probably a pretty short conversation with a publishing house. I mean, just given your stature in this country.
I'd like to think so, but things have gotten tighter and tighter, and I'm going back and forth right now with publishers about an idea, and there doesn't seem to be a rush to embrace. It's like everything's wary, and they keep talking about how markets are difficult these years. So we'll see. I mean, the children's books are fun, and I don't lie awake nights worrying about them at all. But I do actually, now that I'm so-called retired, which I don't much care for, I'd like to be going on some larger project.
Is there anything particular you could share with us, or is it all kind of undercover right now until a deal is signed?
No, not undercover. My daughter, one daughter says that I should write a book about retirement. And I think she's right, because so I started looking at books on retirements, and almost invariably they're about money and about investing.
Right.
And I think if somebody needs to write a book about the psychology of retirement, in fact, the history of retirement, who came up with this idea?
Yeah, wow. I want to know, in terms, you've been a prolific writer, reporter. How have the new mediums affected the message of journalism, in the sense of there's so many different ways to tell a story now? How has that affected the art? Meaning, you have reporters who have Twitter before they write, tweeting out stuff before they write their article, that would go, online digitally. So how have the mediums affected the message?
Well, I think, but I'm going to be showing my age here. I think to a great detriment. It's been a terrible thing that I have been saying for some time now, that what hockey in particular desperately is in need of is a hockey outsider. They have all these hockey insiders, but a hockey insider has turned news, and this is what passes for news now, is how a contract breaks down. Most of us could care less how a contract breaks down, but that's become the obsessive part of reporting news now. Who might be traded, and how does a contract break down? Where are the people who will tell me how the game is being played, or why it's being played like it's being played? Have you noticed in the last few years that every power play now comes up the ice, somebody carries the puck up the ice and then passes it back the zone?
Yeah, the drop pass at the blue line.
What's that for? Who are they fooling? Who came up with that? And why does everybody do it? Nobody talks about these things at all. We're not hearing enough about concussion. We're not hearing enough about fighting, hopefully against it. We're not hearing people who are willing to take on the NHL, because what's become news in hockey has become distributed by the NHL, and that is who gets traded, what a contract breaks down, and the trivia, to me, the trivia of the sport. I want to know the meat and potatoes of the sport, and we're not getting too much of that.
And aside from that nuts and bolts stuff, how about the art of the long form piece? Do you think? I mean, you look at publications like The Athletic, and even to some degree, Sportsnet has a pretty good long form element. But do you think that maybe these quick hitter, new age ways of communicating from the reporter to the public have taken away from the art of writing?
Oh yes, because most of these groups, and I'll just say all of them for the sake of argument, measure their success in terms of hits. And you can take the most magnificent long-form piece of journalism, and there are lots of them out there, believe me, and just stack them up against a quick little piece that is about an injury, or is about a possible scandal, or is about a coach going off the deep end, and you'll see that the hits are incomparable, so that the popularity of the quick hit and the sensational hit so supersedes the import and the gravity of this great long read, that those who are crunching the numbers and deciding what works and what doesn't work are going to go every time for the quick hit. And that's wrong.
Yeah. Where does that start to change? Where does that start to change? Like how you say there is obviously a crying need for a hockey outsider, but how does one get started in doing that?
I don't know. I got to say that though I didn't think it would work, the Athletic seems to be working quite well, and they're doing some very good work. You mentioned Sean Fitzgerald a few moments ago. And he's doing some long read stuff, and so are others. So maybe they will be able to do it. I hope so.
Is there
There's still some good newspaper work done. There's still some good magazine work done, of course. And there's some really good work done on kind of mini documentaries by the sports channels. But still not enough for me.
Are there any current writers that you kind of follow in Canada that you enjoy, reading their work? We talked about Sean in his book. He was on the podcast talking about his book about minor hockey. But yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, Cam Cole isn't writing much anymore, but I follow him on Twitter because I think he's good. I miss people like Al Strachan and Cam and that, but I still get to read, say, Mark Spector, Eric Duhatchik, Sean Fitzgerald we just mentioned, Earl McRae we terribly miss. Jack Todd writes some very controversial and tough columns in Montreal. Wayne Scanlon's doing some lovely work here now for Sportsnet. Bruce Garriock I follow and the boys around here. There's some excellent young women writers now for The Athletic. We miss Christy Blatchford terribly because when she took her pen to sports, she was absolutely wonderful at it. There's a lot of good people out there. And, you still have people like Stephen Brunt doing beautiful work, but it's now done in visual for television. But it's still, the words are beautiful.
Yeah, he does make excellent features. I just got to quickly ask you before we close out. I've heard that Al Strachan's got a new book coming out called The Hot Stove in November. We're looking to have him on. Are you looking forward to that one? Had you heard about that one?
Of course. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I wonder if you'll be mentioning Berkey at
all. Well, listen, Roy, is there anything you would like to add before we close out here today on SportsLit?
No, I'd just like to say that how appreciative my daughter and I are that you're a program that aims at grown-ups, let's say, and for you to pay attention to books aimed at children with somewhat grown-up messages, it's great, and we sure appreciate it, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Roy and Nate.
Yes, thank you so much, Roy.
I know I just got to quickly speak for Nate here. I know how he's been talking about your books forever, so I know this is a big day for him especially. So thanks again for taking the time to speak with us.
Yay, Nate. Yay, Nate.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.